Okay, this is a very brief video to give the example of that which Dr. Walter Martin, founder of the Christian Research Institute, he called this theological term switching. It was in the 80s. Of course, he went home in 1989. His homegoing was in 1989. But prior to that, he was very active. Today I have access to more of his information because of technology, but he was the first person to introduce me to theological term switching, and that was sometime back, maybe mid-80s or so, when I discovered it or came across it. But the example we'll give will be just a really, let's say a elemental one. You hear a lot of alarming statements about something about baptism, of course, and people really get excited. Not enough to study, but excited enough to, let's say, disparage other people. So let's say baptismal, and then they come up with this novel, they pair this up and refer to baptismal regeneration. And people say, oh, that's difficult, that's very, very hard to discuss. And well, we'll just take one passage, Mark 16:16. He that believeth and is baptized shall be saved. So what's the term switched? Well, the word in the King James Version, Pure Cambridge Edition, which I've now upgraded from Oxford and just merely a Cambridge to now the Pure Cambridge Edition is what I now use. So Mark 16:16, it says, he that believeth and is baptized shall be saved. Well, all the economy that's been generated through, actually it's an artificial controversy, it's not based upon anything actually real, it's called the reification fallacy. Reification fallacy. This has become so run amok, I suppose, that the scope of it is to the point where people say, well, baptismal regeneration says this, as though it's walking, talking, and breathing. It doesn't even exist, just as we would say in the colloquial expression, or according to the crude street talk. There just ain't no such thing. It was all a product of term switching. And what happened was that's why I was grateful people helped me, because I had no idea what was behind it. So you just change this to, instead of he that believeth and is baptized shall be saved, change it to he that believeth and is baptized shall be fathered. And that's where the idea of the word regenerated, that's where that comes from. And then now you have all this tension. Remember, people, all of us, like to jump in and fight where the line's drawn, which these practitioners know that once they draw a line, people begin to pick sides and say horrible things about each other, maybe hold little signs up, and their growls, especially during the election time now. You can see people hate Americans as much as the terrorists do. Apparently they speak so horribly of each other, they never notice. But all you have to do is draw the line, and people begin to banter and throw things. And as I like to speak of KOINE the commoner, he shows up and asks, hey, what's all the ruckus about? And they're all like, I can't stand this guy, he teaches baptismal regeneration. And this guy says, I hate that guy, he doesn't teach it. And you'll notice neither's defined their terms or even are aware of the strategy behind it. But neither side's any better when the best they can say is something ill-disposed toward the other. It reflects an ignorance of the text, a willful, deliberate ignorance of the text. And that's where all this becomes so ugly. But you say, well, what would it look like? Since term switching is never written down. You can talk with someone. Now they'll tell you they believe the text teaches regeneration. But if it did, just, give us the text, because here it's he who believes, and this word here is believe. It's very obvious. He who believes. He who believes, and here we have this Granville Sharp, which is a lot easier than the, I've heard people say, oh, that's too complicated. I'm like, well, I guess keep the fight going. It's easier for them to fight, which there's no thought involved. That is, and here you come over here, and it's passive here, is baptized. That's passive, so you'd have to identify or get to identify the agency. Of course, term switching and those who are incited to hate others, each other, those who speak ugly things against baptismal regeneration are the advocates of it, and the advocates who preach ugly things against people who won't go along with it. Neither necessarily have resolved the problem. So here's where will be saved, will be saved. And here's where the term that the switch comes in here, where you'll find the term isn't in the text, and this is what it would look like. There we go. That's what it would look like if the person were actually teaching. If the Bible taught, he who believes, that is baptized, or the one who believes, that is baptized, will be saved, and they mean regenerated or fathered, then here's the term that would be in the text. Now, you won't find a text that says this, and of course you won't find very many people caring to point this out. That's why KOINE is extending the favor to others, because so few people can pause and control their emotions enough to say, well, if it says what you're teaching, then when the Bible says something, it says it in a written form. And of course, the rest of it's very easy to read. But the one who disbelieves, there's that alpha privative, the negation. The one who disbelieves, and then there's that long word. This is the preposition down. This is from the word krino, judge, and this is future passive, of course. But again, you don't find this written, so that's why no one really argues with anyone that reads KOINE, because they realize they don't have a text, and they realize that Christians don't really have a need to amplify and enlarge a conversation or to invest in it emotion and all the outlandish, horrible things people say about each other. But term switching, just this one example, is quite sufficient to show just how sad it is out there, how many people in the name of their Christ hate each other. Of course, you can go in other texts where it says that Noah was saved through water. He wasn't fathered through water. But it's called theological term-switching, and Mark 16:16 is a great example. And look at all the heartache and grief that people have. And then look at, because so much has been built on it, upon it, that is, people can't seem to walk away. But that ignores God's favor. God always supports, favors, and encourages us to just follow the text and believe His word. So that's plenty for theological term switching.